Hello once again. This is Chapter 1, Section 1, Part 2. We're going to learn a little bit more about government basics. So you've discovered the four purposes or the four characteristics of a state: population, territory, sovereignty, and government. We discussed the four theories of how a government or how a state was born: evolutionary, divine right, social contract, and force. And so now we're going to talk about one of those characteristics, government, and the purposes of government. So if you'll find those places on your notes, we'll get started with that. One of the first purposes of government is to maintain social order. In other words, to give people laws and enforce those laws to encounter the people's future. Maintaining social order could be said in a variety of ways. You could say that government is all about making sure that we're not naughty, or making sure that things run smoothly. When we're talking about social order, we're actually talking about the behaviors, provide the rules of how things should be done. Okay, so how should things be done? Passing laws and enforcing them, making sure you're planning for what the government or what the country, the United States, is going to look like in 20 years, creating an educational system, making it possible for people to raise their families. Okay, to provide public services. Providing public services means that give people what they need. Help provide the services what they need to get through their days. You'll notice that I have the word public services. It means that those are available to all because of taxes. For example, we don't think anything about having the fact that we have clean water, or a safe sewage system, or postal services, or roads or highways. Abraham Lincoln once said that government should only provide what people can't do for themselves, to provide those essential services. And that is ultimately the difference between the Republicans and the Democrats. Republicans believe fundamentally that some of those services should not be provided publicly. For example, homelessness. Republicans as a whole will believe that the private sector should take care of certain social services, food banks, things like Atlas. Whereas the Democrats believe that these problems are so big that they should be provided for by the government. The next two are fairly easy to understand, especially this one. Provide national security. Provide a military, protect us from outside attacks. Homeland Security is our newest form of cabinet position. It was created after the bombing at the Twin Towers and the Pentagon, and it is now the largest agency in the government. Homeland Security will deal with everything from the Defense Department to cropland dusting, National Guard, law enforcement. So all of these things that went on this last summer, Black Lives Matter, and of course, the riots that took place in various cities, providing a national security and defense would be part of that. Okay. And the final purpose is making economic decisions. Notice that again, I circle the word public. Distributing public services, collecting taxes, determining the money, that's how the taxes are supposed to be spent, creating a monetary system, like what is our coinage going to look like, making sure that that economic system is stable and that we don't have to worry about the collapse of it. Now, if you turn your paper over, we're going to take a look at two really famous philosophers. The first one is by the name of Thomas Hobbes. Thomas Hobbes was a scholar, and he believed in what was called the state of nature. And we're going to talk a lot about this in class rather than so much talking about it here in our notes. But he believed that in a famous book called Leviathan, that people are incapable of ruling themselves, that we're naturally self-centered and quarrelsome, and that we need an iron fist and a strong leader. Okay, he didn't paint a very pretty picture of what life was like without the government. So he lived in a time where he believed that there was a social contract between the people and their government. And of course, we've heard the word social contract before because one of the theories of how country is born is social contract. We're going to talk about Leviathan in class, as well as Hobbes' disciple, who you guys have heard of before because we talked about him a lot in American Lit last year, and that's John Locke. He always looks like he's one step away from death, but John Locke, and I'm just going to read this to you here. Okay, the single most influence that shaped the founding of the United States was a man by the name of John Locke. He agreed with Hobbes regarding the self-interest of the nature of human, but he was a little bit more optimistic about their ability to use reason to avoid tyranny. He wrote a book called The Second Treatise of Government, and he identified the basis of legitimate government. According to Locke, a ruler gains authority through the consent of the government governed. The duty of the government is to protect the natural rights of the people, which Locke believed to include life, liberty, and property. Heard that before. If the government fails to protect those rights, then the citizens have the right to overthrow this government. This deeply influenced our founding fathers, included Thomas Jefferson, George Washington, James Madison, and in fact, Locke is still discussed today. He might be so much as called a Laconian. Now, as I said, we're going to be dealing with both Hobbes and Locke in class today, but I wanted to introduce you to him through this. All right, so hopefully these videos are working. Thank you again for those that texted me and said that they couldn't access them. It was a simple click. We'll see you in class.